Hey, you guys, this is Valerie Z.
And this is Ilka D. And this is the You Unscripted podcast,
where we empower you to speak your truth by tapping in to your authenticity. Hey, everybody. This is the You Unscripted podcast. This is episode 5, and I am Valerie Z.
And this is Ilka D. And we are opening up another week of conversation and thought. And, you know, as Valerie and I were preparing for this week's discussion, we've been chatting about a couple of things that are actually happening in real time. It's very indicative, to be honest, of struggle or challenge or difficulty, right, in life, the element of resilience. How does resilience play into our ability to keep moving forward? And, you know, one of the interesting things that immediately comes to mind, you know, when I think of resilience, because I tend to have kind of a visual mind. And so right away, I see this boxer. You know, I've seen so many videos of these boxers or these guys that are working out in the gym. It's a video of somebody in the gym with them, right? Just pounding on their abs, just left, right hook, left hook, right hook into the abs. And, you know, there's this strength and grit in their face that they're just tolerating every single one of those punches, right? But I think one of the underlying elements of resilience that people don't see on the outside is what's happening to you on the inside that impacts your tenacity for resilience, right? That impacts your bounce back and defines your level of resilience, right? Your tolerance for resilience. Like underneath the skin, my guy could very well have a busted liver at this point, but nobody sees that in the video. They just see him like motherfucker, like he can fucking take it, right? And then the camera cuts off and they got to rush this motherfucker to the hospital because they just busted his liver into 30 pieces. Like the truth, in my opinion, about resilience is not just, you know, the outward perspective of your ability to handle it, to take it, to grit through it, to wade through the shit and fucking make it. Like, I think that is not resilience, to be honest. The imagery on the outside. I think resilience, in my opinion, happens on the inside. It starts to manifest an external image when your inner self connects with your outer self. And I think that's where the talent in being able to bounce back, the skill set in being able to bounce back connects with that in its entirety. And now you've got resilience. Val, what do you think?
It's a beautiful way of putting it. I think resilience for me is definitely, it's an internal muscle. I think when we talk about resilience, we have to be careful because I think there's two different ways of doing life when there's curveballs or challenges. One is bypassing and numbing. So somebody might think, oh, I'm resilient, but they're bypassing all of these challenges in life. Maybe they're drinking or numbing out in some way.
We all know who you are. For everybody listening, we all know who you are. You know, something went wrong, something's hurting you, something's fucking you up inside. And instead of dealing with that, taking the time to process what's going on, no, you're the guy or the girl that's like, fuck yeah, we're going out. I'm not going to let this stop me. And you take off and you're outside and you're with all your friends and you're outside, like you're living large. You got a smile on your face. You're spending money. That is not resilience, ladies and gentlemen. That is not resilience. That is numbing. That is bullshit. That is our first layer of bullshit. We're just lying to everybody because we're hiding the truth about how we feel or the impact of what is happening where we're diluting the truth. And that is not resilience because that shit comes back and bites you in the ass. And when you hit, ooh, fuck. Ooh, when you hit and it really gets you, oh, bro, you're on the floor on your knees. Like, That's one of your moments where you're begging God, please get me through this. I promise I won't ever blank, right? That is not resilience. That is not resilience. That is just lying.
And that used to be me. And that used to be me. That's why I wanted to insert that point, is because it's easy to get confused, especially with people that are barely starting out with doing inner work, or maybe haven't done much of inner work. If you're going out to get your mind off of things and numb out, it's not going to build your resilience muscle. What is going to build resilience is going inside. So when things happen in your life, you can start building resilience by asking yourself the right questions. What is this trying to teach me about me? What can I learn about myself in this situation? When you start asking yourself empowering questions like that, and you get honest with yourself, then there's always something to grow from. There's always a lesson there for you to learn about yourself. And I think that's how you build resilience. It's making sure that whatever curveball comes your way in life, is that you're first looking at yourself and asking yourself questions that are going to help you grow, that are going to help you heal something. If life throws you a curveball and you're quick to point fingers, there's no growth in that. The growth happens when you say, what can I learn about myself and what can I do differently next time to make sure that I show up better for others, for myself? That's what I think.
I completely agree. However, the truth is, and you and I both know that because we're living it. We've lived it. We've survived it. We've lived it again, rinse, repeat. Everyone who is aging in life has their own versions of their rinse, repeat of something that knocks them down, they get back up. But you mentioned an extremely pivotal point in your description by saying that there's a point where we have to go inside. It's the going inside that I believe is the key, but that is the hardest part, because
Absolutely.
it's crazy how much inevitably, even unintentionally, maybe in most cases, it's pretty impressive how when something goes wrong, it's my opinion that your senses start to pick up the severity or the depth of the damage first. And what I mean by that, right? You're sitting in the kitchen, let's say your partner, the husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, fiance, whatever the fuck it is, your partner is sitting there. There's a tense emotion in the air. You can feel it because people describe it as, you could cut the air with a knife, right? You can cut just the stress in the air with a knife. You ask a question of the other person and boom, explosion. The other person's response is whatever it is. Now there's an argument, right? It's your senses that first pick up on, uh-oh, there's a fucking problem. What is happening right now? Right? Your brain starts to pick up on, wait a minute, what the hell? How did this go left? So it's crazy because there's no way at that moment, because we're in fight or flight. Like this other person is figuratively speaking, taking a swing at you, blah, 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 blah. You're processing as best as you can now with your ears, right? Your auditory system kicks in. And now you're seeing the negative response on that person's face. That visual acuity is what starts to give you a physical response. Like, wait a minute, why are you looking at me? Right? They're yelling. Why are you screaming at me? Instantaneously, your central nervous system goes into alert, alert, alert. We're shutting down.
Fight or flight.
Fight or flight kicks in, and ain't nobody going inside shit at that moment. So here's the problem, ladies and gentlemen. Now you're at peak stress. You're in complete survival mode. And that is the moment where somehow we have to find a second to process what's happening, because your mind may cause you to respond in a way and in defense of something that may not have happened yet. but you're in fight or flight mode. You're way over there already. You're like, what the fuck? This fucking bitch is coming at me. Or this motherfucker has a nerve to fucking be coming at me and rushing at me, right? Everyone's processing whatever is going on. And you're in defense mode. No one is processing, I need to go inside. I need to think about how I'm impacting the other person. This is where I think it's important for elements, concepts of communication and self-control kick in. You have to remind yourself that that person, even if you have a great relationship, which we all know does not exist in perfection, right? No one is perfect. No male, no female, no whatever. No one is perfect. And regardless of the nature of the relationship, whether it's with a intimate partner, whether it's with a friend, whether this is a situation between you and a parent or you and a coworker or you and a partner, a business partner, sometimes we have to remind ourselves, like literally remind ourselves, hey, wait a minute. That person is a friendly. That's not an enemy. But many of us don't have the skill, and often because of what's happened to you in the past, your degree for a response at that moment, your level of response can be so overkill what is necessary, but someone has hit a trigger. And so your fight or flight kicks in. And at that point, Val, what in your opinion could people do at that moment of just intensity to buy that second of reflection that it takes to go, wait a minute, let me detach from this for a second? Because obviously someone in an argument is always surprised. Someone in that two-way, bi-directional lack of communication is always surprised and caught off guard. So sometimes it takes a second to go, whoa, what the hell's happening? And you don't even have that time to process because someone's literally coming at your jugular. So you gotta, whoa, wait a minute. Right? You got to get all your tools out. You got to get in full defense mode. You got to put the armor on. You have to get ready for battle. And it has to happen in milliseconds. For some people, that's a matter of life or death. For some people, they respond to a spilled glass of milk like it's life or death. And in all cases, I think everyone needs a second to catch yourself, process what's happening, and try to make the best decision what to do next. Val, what do you think can help people in that moment? Because that moment is pivotal, ladies and gentlemen, around the world, a través de todo el mundo, tout le monde. That is the moment that we fuck shit up if we don't stop for a second. It may be the wrong decision and we didn't defend ourselves appropriately, and it could lead to physical damage, physical pain, physical injury, or emotional in such a way that was the moment where you came off the cuff and said some shit, swung a hand, pulled a knife, grabbed a throat, threw something away, broke it, lost it, dunked it. That reflex moment is what you will spend the next moments trying to fix. And you cannot go backwards once something has been done. Val, what can we do at that point to help with that processing?
Okay, so physical abuse is never okay.
Never.
Domestic violence is never okay. So if you are in a domestic violence situation, we will put some resources for you in the show notes. You should not subject yourself to physical violence in any way, shape, or form. So I'm going to address your question not in a domestic violence situation, because that requires you to just call 911 and do what you can to remove yourself from that situation and get to somewhere safe. So we'll put those resources in the show notes. In any other situation, I would say remind your partner in that moment, because some people go straight into fight or flight mode. There are people who are highly defensive, more than you and me or whatnot. And so I would remind my partner, hey, I'm not your enemy. So if I ask my partner something and she gets highly defensive or snaps at me for simply asking a question, or wanting to have a conversation about something. And she goes straight into highly defensive mode. What I've done in the past is remind my partner that, like, hey, I'm not your enemy. We're on the same team. Treat me as such, right? Because I'm not trying to attack you. I'm simply trying to have a conversation. Can we have a conversation? Can we just talk? It doesn't need to always be a fight.
Right.
Those are the statements I've said in the past to help diffuse the situation. Sometimes it falls on deaf ears. Sometimes it works. But I'm always going to remind my partner, hey, we can talk about this. We don't have to argue about this. And another thing I've also said in the past is your feelings are just as important as mine.
That works regardless across the board, regardless of the relationship, you guys. Like, you know, I think one of the things that happens in that situation is when someone has said something accusatory, demeaning, dismissive, 9 times out of 10, that other person is coming into the room, into the situation, preloaded with something that doesn't yet have something to do with you. And it's hard sometimes to be on the receiving end of that because a person's innate behavior is to react to that with defensive posture. In other words, to defend yourself is the immediate response when someone comes in with an attacking personality. A lot of this is, in fact, resilience because it's not always about being able to handle something that's happening. I think oftentimes it's also about learning from experiences in your past that prepare you to be a more resilient person. But also when you're learning resilience, it also requires comprehension and understanding. And sometimes it requires empathy for another person so that you can understand that perspective, which doesn't always mean that's how you feel, right? It may mean that's how they think you feel. And instead of reacting to that negatively, we have to take a second to understand that it's okay for someone else to have a difference of opinion. And it's okay for us to talk that through. That's the point, Val, that I feel like when we're talking about resilience, you know, the bounce back, I think there's an element of health in that concept. How healthy are you inside yourself to be able to, in fact, be resilient, right? Because I think that also requires people to have self-worth, to understand that they are a good person and that they're worth the second, third, 100th chance, whatever it may be, to get back up again and keep going is oftentimes impacted by so many things. It's not just, can you physically take it?
I'm just going to go back a little bit to the communication part because that's really important. Putting yourself in somebody else's shoes does not mean that you are invalidating yourself. What it means is that you are emotionally healthy enough. It means that you are secure enough to put yourself in somebody else's shoes to understand their perspective. And it doesn't mean that your feelings aren't valid about the situation. It means that you are flexible versus rigid. So that is key in relationships, is being able to see the other person's point of view, not even in relationships. It can be in friendships. It can be in business. It can be in anything, but it's getting to the point internally where you are so secure in yourself, where your ego is not in control of a situation because it needs to roar, right? It means that you are able to see another person's perspective and understand it and know that it doesn't make you any less of a person or any less important because you're able to understand other people. It's really important to build that within yourself. And if you aren't there yet, that's okay, but you can work towards that. I wasn't always a neutral, objective thinker. I was very egotistical in the past before I did any inner work. I was arrogant too.
You scumbag.
I had somebody tell me that I was arrogant, and it's like a slap in the face because nobody had ever told me that before.
Wow.
So
had you turned her down?
I had no, actually, it was a friend, and we would hang out a lot, and we would drink a lot, and I'd talk a lot of shit, and so I'd talk a lot of shit, and I'd talk a lot of shit about people. And one day, she's like, "You know what?" She told me nicely though, but she's like, "You're arrogant." And she kind of chuckled about it, but I knew she was serious. Like intuitively, I knew she was serious. And I was like, "Wait, what do you mean?" And she's like, yeah, you can be arrogant." I was so offended, but I didn't say anything. I took that in and I let it marinate and I let it sit with me. And I wrote it down on the memo pad on my phone because I was already noticing that I had problems with alcohol. So I was making these little notes about myself. And that was one of the things that I wrote down. And it's a characteristic that I wasn't aware of about myself. And it also, I'm very grateful that she told me that because I don't want to be arrogant.
Sure.
I want to be humble. Her making that comment to me planted a seed.
That's
Along
awesome.
with all the blackouts, along with all the rock bottoms, right? Like she also planted a seed as I was starting to initiate this like transformation. And so now I'm able to see another person's perspective. I'm able to be very empathetic to somebody. And here's the thing though, is that you have to be very careful too, because you don't want to be a doormat. Once you've done this much work, you also don't want to be a doormat. So you also have to have strong boundaries. You also have to be able to advocate for yourself confidently and unapologetically because people will walk all over you and they will exploit all of these wonderful qualities that you've now built. So it's a delicate dance.
It is. It is. And, you say a couple of things, when you talk about the fact that a person has to have a flexible demeanor. For all of those listening, that's the real flex, right? It's not, can you take those punches? Can you grit and bear it, right? The real flex is being unbothered, people. The real flex is this dude just literally came up behind me. He's honking his car at me or his horn at me in his car. He's making all of these gestures. The real flex is not allowing that to pull you out of your calm and your peace and to flex with that situation. I think it was Bruce Lee who said, be water, right? Because water can basically find its way through any crevice, any path. Water will actually break the stone. Like the truth of the matter is that we're very rigid individuals instinctively because survival is very instinctive. When you're in fight or flight, you're not thinking about much. You're thinking about the immediate need to survive. And your level of trauma is typically what sets you somewhere on that scale of your ability to flex. And I noticed that even within myself and my degree of trauma, as I got older, I was less willing and less willing and less willing to flex because I had more and more and more to fear, more to dislike about myself and others, more to prove that I could do it. So, the other element too of what I want to point out and what Valerie is saying is ego.
Toxic ego.
Bro, look, you guys, if there is one thing that throws salt in your game, it is your ego. Literally, it is your ego. Like, don't get me wrong. Ego allows us to find confidence and identify pride and to exude that in a way and to cultivate it inside of ourselves and to be proud of ourselves and all of those things. That's ego. And those are all great elements. But there's also a very toxic, very out of control, very bull in a china shop element about ego. And that is that your ego will completely overrun your mind. Your ego has a way of shutting down your mind. You stop thinking about what's happening. You stop processing what's happening. You stop looking for solutions. Oh, no, because your
You
ego is
stop
like,
listening to the other
absolutely. Your
person.
ego is like me. What? What was
Yeah,
that? Oh, me?
absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Oh, me? Yep. Nope. Me? Yep. Like, you see what I mean? Your ego is annoying. Your ego is fucking annoying. And we all have to get really good at telling our ego to shut the fuck up, because our ego will mess it up 9 times out of 10, because that's arrogance, right? Our ego is really great at being arrogant. And arrogance starts with my pain is worse. My damage is more important. My time is more important. Right? It turns the situation
My
away.
opinions are better.
Yes, it turns the situation away from us and how can we find a situation that takes us both into consideration into, fuck you, this is just about me. And, it's that, like, depending on where you were raised, no matter where in the world, there are some people that can handle, a real F you moment, right? Like somebody's angry at you, whatever the case, fuck you, I'm out of here, blah, 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 boom. And they don't take that personal as much as it communicates that the other person's angry. Copy, understood. The problem, though, is that is the problem with communication. Some people, even though they can visually see that you are angry, even though they can audibly hear that you're angry, the second that somebody says something like, fuck you, I'm angry. Oh no. Oh no, no, no. Now you've injured their self-esteem. Now we go inside. And we're not going inside from the perspective of, okay, how can I do this better, handle this right? You know what I mean? No. Now it's, how dare you? And whoop, that ego has a great, super call to action. Oh, yeah? Okay. Now we get to unleash. And that's where the comeback is just bad. Like, we're not going to make any progress. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to make any progress. This is going to get worse. And I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of that because of the trauma there. So sometimes your resilience to get up, get back on track is impacted, is damaged, is held back by the trauma that lies underneath, the damage that exists underneath the exterior, and how it is that that's sitting there festering, infecting, contaminating the rest of you, that will impact your ability to get back up and get going, to protect yourself and to realize that it's okay to have interruptions, delays, small failures or failures. Like, if you can't process that ego out of things, then what happens is you're going to end up in a situation where our true ability to be resilient is always going to be an injured response as opposed to a proactive and positive response or a positive response. If we're always injured, like in my case, if we always revert back to the injury, because there's been so much injury, and we have a responsibility to resolve that. Like, all of us have our own trash can inside. We don't do a good job of using it. On the contrary, you keep adding storage units to your shit. You just keep storing and storing and storing and storing and storing, and nothing is getting purged. Nothing is getting dealt with. Val, what happens when someone just ends up with an entire world full of pain?
Well, alcoholism, drug addiction.
That's right.
Domestic violence, some sort of abuse towards yourself or others.
Correct.
Yeah, that was me. I was an alcoholic for several years and blackout drinker, because everything you go through, if you're not taking an active role in healing yourself, in processing, then it's all compounding, and it's layer upon layer upon layer of resentments and hurt and grief and abuse and trauma. And all of that just eventually takes its toll where all you want to do is escape yourself, disconnect from your reality in some way, numb out in some way. So it's really, really important to start at the very beginning, address your core wounds.
How could they even start to figure that out? Because, obviously we tend to want to cover up, your dogs, your cats, they use the restroom, they want to cover it up. That we do the same thing inside of our souls, inside of our psyches. We immediately want to fix and move forward. Like, no, we're not going to spend any time here. I'm not dealing with this. You just cover it up and boom, you're off. And the problem is that is sitting there festering and festering, and something else completely unrelated could potentially connect with that, and boom, you have a whole
Trigger it.
new trigger, right? You have a whole new connection to some other pain that now deepens that pain and strengthens its power over you. And that impacts your behavior, people. Like, it is not, in literally trying not to be funny at all, or light about the situation. You're going to spend most of your life dealing with things that other people have done to you. Then the worst part is your reaction to those things. And in some cases, you're not going to be satisfied with how you reacted to some things. And that's okay. You can learn from those things and you can be better for yourself because you've had whatever experience that was. You still have the ability to live beyond it. And now you have that experience as knowledge, identification. You can start to see in others things, characteristics, personalities that aren't healthy for you. It doesn't mean that you have to call people out on who they are. Yes, of course, where it makes sense, where it's safe, where the conversation is open and safe enough for that, people may respond. But if you're in a situation where you're in fight or flight, let's take it down notches. Let's put it in a business environment. You're frustrated because you have been trying to reach this deadline. Things are preventing you from getting there. The coffee machine is empty. Everybody left. You're still there. It's 8:30 at night. You have to turn it in an hour. You're still missing assets from whatever department, right? There's a million reasons why things are going wrong. Somebody walks up to you and says, "Hey, do you have that blah, blah, blah?" And you turn around, and what you choose to do at that moment is a direct reflection of your ability to find that second to just put it in perspective and give a proper response, as opposed to most people in that situation will explode. I'm trying my best. Da, da, da. I blah, 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 blah. The million reasons why everything is not working still does not absolve you, right? It still does not absolve you of your responsibility to be a normal human being, in the sense that you can communicate with someone else, in the sense that you can communicate at all. Valerie, what do you think of your clients, of your experiences? What do you think is the biggest obstacle that people face in being able to communicate amongst other people, interpersonally with other people? What do you think is the biggest factor in the stifling that happens in communication?
I think a big obstacle is insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody is deeply insecure, they are going to be loud. They are going to be self-centered. They're going to be egotistical. They are going to pathologically self-advocate and shut out anybody else's opinion. Why are you laughing?
That's
Why are you
insane. Did you
laughing?
guys hear that? Pathologically self-advocate. So they're going to pathologically talk about themselves till you can't stand another second of their being. And we all know someone like that just literally doesn't even need to be in a room with someone else, because they're sucking up all the oxygen talking about themselves. That makes me laugh, because we all know someone like that.
Yeah. So somebody who's just very self-centered and only knows, cares about their perspective. When there is another human being trying to communicate with them and they seriously just don't care. So I think at the root of that is insecurity. So then somebody in that situation who truly wants to grow would have to admit to themselves, like, okay, what am I so insecure about? Why am I so self-centered? First of all, you have to be willing to get honest with yourself about that. A lot of people don't want to get honest with themselves about that. But underneath that honesty, you're going to find your core wounds. That's why it's so important to identify your core wounds, because that is how you're going to heal the insecurity. And I'll give you an example. Like, my own personal testimony is I had to admit to myself that I did not love myself. That is really hard to admit. But what that did, that honesty led me to my core wounds, because after I admitted to myself that I did not love myself, then the next question naturally was, why don't I love myself? Why do I have this self-loathing? Where is that coming from and why is it there? So that answer led me to a core wound, which is something that happened to me when I was 5 years old. So that's what I mean by identifying core wounds, is that you have to get honest with yourself first. It's like an alcoholic who needs to stop drinking. First, they have to admit that they're an alcoholic in order to be able to take the next step.
That calls in the concept of emotional regulation, right? I'm always going to refer back to Daniel. Yay, Daniel. Shout out Daniel on BetterHelp. Daniel, like I always say, put it to me in a way that he said, how do you want to react? And, that question buys you that millisecond of time that I keep referring to, where you can take that moment for emotional regulation. Hold on a second. What's going on? Right? Assess the situation that's occurring. Make a decision about your safety. First and foremost, make a decision about how you can understand and communicate with this other person or people so that thoughts can be shared and processed and not forced on others. And I'm going to give a business idea, because we talk a lot about, personal examples. But in business, we deal with this a little bit differently, because for the most part, what's interesting in a business environment that's not necessarily present in a personal is a hierarchy, right? When you're in a hierarchical system, there's automatically this element of resiliency, in the sense that that this person's a supervisor or a manager, that person's a subordinate, that person's a subordinate, that person's a subordinate. And there's an expectation of, okay, well, this person's going to give these kinds of directions, words, whatever. This other person is in a position where they have to accept that information, utilize it for whatever, to go do what they have to do, right? So it breaks it down in a way that allows there to automatically be an element of resiliency, because that guy's the manager, so he tends to pop off when he's under stress. So you've already got that buffer that says, okay, I know it's not personal. He's just in this role, which we don't have when we are in interpersonal, intimate relationships, right? We don't have a hierarchy. There's supposed to be equality. And I think most times there isn't. And what I mean by that is, on an emotional level, there's usually one or the other person that sucks up the oxygen in the room. And that inequality tends to bear its ugly face in the form of arrogance, in the form of lack of communication, in the form of egotistical behavior. And so the other person right off the rip is like, hey, wait a minute. Whoa, 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 whoa. Why are you talking to me like that? You wouldn't do the same thing to the other person, right? And in a business environment, we all know that you don't just fucking go off on the manager. So there's an element of acceptance that we've already signed up for when we're in a work environment, because there's that hierarchical system. Amongst two people that are sharing a life together, sharing a home together, they're sharing intimacies together, there is no hierarchy. So there's this expectation of equality that, in my opinion, tends to go out the window depending on how things are dealt with by one or the other or both partners, right? That's what becomes hard, because now we're dealing with something personal. Now you've said something about my dress, and I put this dress on because I was trying to impress you. But you've made a comment about my dress relevant to other people that I could care less about. But the other person is making a comment about the dress because that person is feeling nervous and insecure about maybe how beautiful you look in the dress. And they're maybe asking, hey, am I going to look silly next to this person? Is that person going to want to be proud to walk in with me? Right? I will say this. I've never been on that side of the questioning, ladies and gentlemen. If you're walking in with me somewhere, you better believe that I know where I'm supposed to be. And I don't know where that comes from, to be honest, because I have been so insecure in so many other areas of my life. But when I'm walking into an event, when I'm walking in to do what I do, there's no doubt about my value. But I have been uncomfortable in the dress. And so immediately that impacts. I'm walking into a room full of 500 people that have paid to come see me speak. But do I look okay? Is my chubby showing? Right? Did the faja actually do its thing, or is it rolling up? any big girls out there? Holler at the big girls. What up around the world? Because you've all put a faja on, and all of us have had the situation where the shit starts rolling up. You want to die. Right? So we've all had little instances like that affect our resiliency. But those are things that are okay. Those are things that happen. Those are things that it's really no big deal. We survive it. We move forward because it's not really questioning your character. It's not really impacting your personality, and it's not injuring your soul. Those are the things that Valerie has done a really good job helping me deal with, are the things that hit underneath the surface. And I wanted to talk about resiliency today because, as we spoke about in the last episode, Val is dealing with the need to be resilient on a tremendous scale, considering the recent losses in her family and having to be in a position where she wants to support at the same time that she's also processing her own pain and her own loss. Right? We talk about, of course, I've talked about my divorce and how painful that's been, the impact that's had on my children, the difficulty for them to be able to continue to function while dealing with their loss, right? All of those things have in common the element of resiliency. We're trying to keep going. We're trying to stay strong. We're trying to communicate where it's difficult to do so. And I thought it was an interesting topic for this week because one of the things that I saw about that, and that I identify with, and that I see many, 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 many thousands of people in my experience have also come across that concept. How do we keep fighting?
I think it's important to highlight the fact that when you are facing something challenging is to allow the emotions to surface. If you want to cry, let yourself cry. Let that sadness surface. Let it engulf you, and let the shedding of all of those tears wash away that sadness. And you'll notice that after crying, you feel relieved. You feel better. It's sort of like that clear sky after the rainy day. And let that happen as many times as it needs to happen. That is how you get through something. A lot of people want to bypass that. A lot of people don't want to deal with that because they think that they're going to get stuck there. But that is how you process, is that you allow yourself to feel. I think it's really important to highlight that. That's something that I've been telling my mom since last week, since my grandma passed away, because she breaks down crying, like hard crying. And I tell her, Mom, llore. Si quiere llorar, llore. Procese todo eso. Sienta lo que tenga que sentir. Llore lo que tenga que llorar. And then she does. And she feels better for a few hours. And then it comes again. And then again, and again. So what I want to leave the listeners with is, in order to build resilience, true resilience, genuine resilience, is to make sure that you're addressing your core wounds if you haven't done that. When you address your core wounds and you take an active role in healing them, your life is going to change. Why? Because nobody's going to be able to control your emotions anymore. You are going to be able to control your emotions. And you may experience a trigger, but when you heal your core wounds, you are going to be blessed with this gap now, a gap in how you react. And you can decide now how you react, because those core wounds are going to be addressed. They're going to be healed. There will be a scar. It's not that you won't have triggers, but you'll be able to manage those triggers better. So we're not erasing triggers. What we're doing is that we're able to manage them better. We're able to have self-awareness. We're able to stop ourselves and pause and go, oh, okay, I know what this is. I know what this is connected to. This is deeper than what's happening right now. Yes, I feel angry right now, or yes, I feel hurt right now, but it's deeper than this situation. This situation is just triggering something from the past. And you're able to just go, all right, okay. And then you're able to navigate your emotions better, and you're able to communicate your emotions better. You don't take your emotions out on somebody, but you're able to communicate your anger to somebody. Imagine that. Instead of lashing out your anger on somebody and discharging it onto somebody, now you're going to be able to communicate that anger to someone and go, hey, that wasn't cool. That really offended me, and I'm really upset. That's very different than what the fuck? And,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very different. So, that's the beauty about working on your core wounds. And it starts with just getting honest with yourself about what it is that you're going through. If you are noticing that you're living a self-destructive lifestyle, start asking yourself questions like, why do I live this way? Why don't I value my safety? Why don't I love myself? Because if I loved myself, I wouldn't be living this self-destructive way. So that's kind of how I started exploring my core wounds, and get radically honest with yourself. That will lead you to your core wounds. Question after question after question led me to the age of 5. So we can go deeper on that on another episode.
I appreciate that you share that, Val, because, ladies and gentlemen around the world that are listening, half the battle in working on yourself and not even intentionally. I mean, half the battle in just understanding yourself enough to know how to better address things that bother you, that other people do to you, is to firstly admit that those things bother you. And Valerie hits a number of elements that we really do need to spend a little bit more time on. But I want to thank you, Val, as usual, for another episode. Thank you, listeners everywhere, for tuning in and listening to our conversation with each other. And we're hoping that this reaches out to you in a positive way and gives you some insight into maybe what you can identify you're going through too. We're here to help you guys, and we appreciate that you're here every week listening to us just talk really about things that have taken us many, many years to get here. So Val, thank you for another session. If you will, this is Ilka D.
And this is Valerie Z. And this is the You Unscripted podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week, guys. Bye.
Bye.